I didn't know my wife was running an experiment on me until it was already halfway over. She called it just having a little fun, but it felt more like she was stress testing my marriage like it was a cheap lawn chair from Walmart. It started on a Monday. I walked into the kitchen before work and found her sipping coffee with that look, the one that meant she'd already decided something and wasn't planning to tell me until I stumbled into it. She set her mug down and said, "I want to see how much you tolerate for 7 days." I laughed at first, thought it was a joke. "What are you talking about?" "It's like a relationship challenge," she said, grinning. "I'm going to push you a little every day. See where your line is." Now, I've been married 22 years. I've sat through her redecorating phases, her no carbs in the house phase, and that one summer she decided she was a vegan until she caught the smell of my ribeye. I figured this was just another harmless mood swing. So I said, "Fine, you won't break me." But I didn't know she was going to come out swinging on day one. That evening, I walked into our bedroom and froze. My recliner, my leather, perfectly broken in, 20-year-old recliner, was gone. In its place, a potted ficus and some overpriced accent chair that looked like it was designed to punish a man for sitting. "Where's my chair?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "Oh," she said, pretending to scroll her phone. "I gave it to Goodwill." It didn't match my vision for the space. Didn't match her vision? That chair had been with me longer than she had. I felt my jaw tighten, but I swallowed it down. This was day one. She was testing me. That night, I sat on the couch, knees up to my chest, trying to find a position that didn't feel like medieval torture. She kept glancing at me, like she was waiting for me to explode. I didn't give her the satisfaction. Day two was quieter, until dinner. I came home from work starving, expecting the pot roast she'd promised the night before. Instead, the kitchen smelled like incense, and there was a big brown paper bag on the counter. "Vegan Thai takeout," she said cheerfully. "We're plant-based this week." Thought it'd be fun. Fun for who? I chewed my way through some sort of curry that tasted like a candle, thinking about the ribeye thawing in the freezer. Again, I kept my cool. She was clearly enjoying this little game. I figured she'd run out of ideas in a couple days. But then came day three, and that was the day she crossed the line. When I walked through the door that night, I immediately knew something was off. There was a man's laugh coming from our living room. Not the TV, an actual man. I stepped inside, and there he was, some guy, sitting in my spot on the couch, holding a glass of my bourbon, wearing a grin like he belonged there. "This is Ryan," my wife said, her tone a little too bright. "He's an old friend. I invited him over for the evening. You don't mind, do you?" Ryan leaned back like he owned the place. "Hope it's okay, man. She said you were cool with it." I stared at them both, the air in the room tightening. My wife was smiling like this was part of her challenge. But she didn't realize something. The game had just changed, and I already knew how it was going to end. Ryan didn't move when I stepped into the living room. He just kept swirling my bourbon like he was checking the legs on a fine wine. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice level. "It's okay. For now." My wife's smile twitched, like she wasn't expecting me to play along. She stood, adjusting her blouse. "I'm going to get the snacks," she said, disappearing into the kitchen. That left me and Ryan in a silence thick enough to chew. "So," I said, "how long have you known my wife?" He took a slow sip before answering. "Met her back in college. We reconnected online." He smiled like he'd just admitted to something he thought I couldn't challenge. "She says you're a good guy. Steady. Tolerant." I leaned forward in my chair, the armchair, since my recliner was gone, and looked him dead in the eye. "She's testing that. And Ryan, you're part of the test." His smirk faltered for a second, then returned. "Guess we'll see how you do." My wife came back with a cheese plate, which was odd, considering the plant-based week, and sat beside him. Too close. She laughed at every dumb thing he said, touching his arm in ways that made my teeth ache. For the next hour, I sat there, nodding along, saying little. I learned Ryan had just gone through a rough breakup and needed a friend. I also learned my wife had apparently been messaging him a lot. Every now and then, she'd shoot me a glance, half amusement, half challenge, like she was daring me to react. I didn't. Instead, I filed away every detail. At one point, Ryan excused himself to use the bathroom. My wife leaned toward me, voice low. "You're doing great. I thought you'd be more reactive." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "You haven't found my breaking point yet." She tilted her head, curious. "So, Where is your breaking point? I kept my smile. You'll know when you hit it. And you won't like the answer. Ryan came back, and the rest of the night was a blur of small talk I didn't care about. When he finally left, he clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends. My wife kissed him on the cheek at the door. That was the moment I decided this little 7-day challenge wasn't going to end the way she thought. That night in bed, she curled up next to me, unusually affectionate. You're taking this so well, she whispered. I stared at the ceiling. I'm patient when I need to be. Day 4, she was up early, humming to herself as she got ready. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving, saying she had errands. I watched her drive off and waited 5 minutes before grabbing my keys. She went to a boutique in the next town over, the same one where she'd once bought herself birthday gifts I never saw. I parked a block away, watching as she met Ryan in the parking lot. So, this wasn't just day 3 fallout. This was a continuation. They hugged, then went inside. I stayed put, letting my pulse slow. Bursting in now would be too easy, too messy. No, I wanted her to believe I was still tolerating things. I wanted her to feel safe right up until the moment I cut the floor out from under her. When she came home later, she handed me a coffee and a smile. Miss me? She asked. I took the cup, meeting her eyes. Every minute. She didn't notice the way my jaw tightened. Or maybe she did, and thought it was restraint. Either way, she had no idea the clock had started ticking. By day 5, I was no longer a participant in her little test. I was the one running the experiment. And my results? She was going to find out exactly where my breaking point was. And she'd regret every second it took to get there. By the time day 5 rolled in, my wife thought she was winning. She came downstairs in a silk blouse I hadn't seen before, smelling faintly of a men's cologne that definitely wasn't mine. She poured her coffee, smiled at me like we were newlyweds, and chirped, 5 down, 2 to go. I played dumb. What's today's challenge? You'll see, she said, grabbing her phone and slipping it into her purse like it was a loaded weapon. When she left for lunch with a friend, I gave her a 10-minute head start and followed in my truck. She drove straight to the same boutique from yesterday, but this time, she didn't meet Ryan outside. She went straight in and stayed nearly 40 minutes. When she emerged, she wasn't carrying a bag, which meant whatever she'd done in there, she didn't want me seeing it. Instead of following her home, I went inside the shop after she left. The clerk recognized her immediately. Oh, your wife was just here. She picked up her special order. Gorgeous set. I kept my face neutral. Special order? The clerk smiled knowingly. Lingerie. Expensive stuff. Custom fit. I thanked her, walked out, and sat in my truck until the heat in my chest cooled enough to drive. That evening, my wife acted like the perfect hostess. Candles lit, a roast in the oven, soft music playing. She poured me a drink and asked about my day like nothing was out of place. I let her talk, watching her, filing away every casual lie. Halfway through dinner, she set her fork down. You know, you haven't really failed any of my challenges. Not even when Ryan came over. I swallowed a mouthful of roast. Maybe I'm more tolerant than you think. She leaned in, smiling. Tomorrow might change that. I matched her smile. I hope so. I'd hate for you to feel like you wasted the week. Her eyes searched mine, but I didn't blink. She thought I was still playing her game. In reality, she was already deep into mine. After she went to bed, I stayed up in my office, pulling up our shared phone account records. She had been texting a number I didn't recognize, dozens of messages every day, sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning. I ran it through a reverse lookup service. Ryan. The next morning, day 6, she was dressed even more carefully than usual. Light perfume, hair done, lipstick just shy of red. Big plans today? I asked casually. Just errands. I nodded. Have fun. An hour later, I was parked half a block from a little wine bar downtown, watching her through the window. She wasn't alone. Ryan was across the table, leaning in close, smiling that smug smile. She laughed, touching his hand like it was second nature. I snapped a few photos with my phone, each one a nail in the coffin. When she got home that afternoon, she kissed me on the cheek and handed me a bag of groceries, a perfect cover. Tomorrow's the last day, she said, eyes sparkling. You ready? I looked at her, really looked at her, the way you look at someone when you've already decided their future. Oh, I'm ready, I said. I've been ready for days. She grinned, mistaking my meaning entirely. That night, as she slept beside me, I set my plan in motion, backing up every photo, every record, every message. She thought she was about to win her little 7-day game. But day seven wasn't going to be a challenge. It was going to be a verdict. By sunrise on day 7, I'd already been up for 2 hours. Coffee in hand, I went over my files one last time. Phone logs, boutique receipt, wine bar photos, the texts between her and Ryan that I'd pulled from our shared account. Everything neatly organized, backed up in 2 different cloud drives, and sitting on a thumb drive in my pocket. My wife came downstairs humming, dressed in a soft blue dress I'd never seen before. It was tasteful but flattering, the kind of thing she used to wear on our anniversaries. She was glowing, the smug kind of glow people get when they think they're in control. "Happy final day," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "This is the big one." I smiled into my coffee. "Can't wait." She wouldn't tell me what the big one was, just that we had dinner reservations downtown and I should wear something nice. The whole day, she floated around the house like a cat toying with a mouse, glancing at me to see if I'd crack. I didn't. If anything, I felt calmer than I had all week. By the time we pulled up to the restaurant, the sun had dipped below the skyline, throwing long shadows across the city streets. She hooked her arm through mine, leaning in close. "Promise you'll be a good sport tonight?" "I always am," I said. The hostess led us to a table near the back. The lighting was warm, intimate. She ordered a bottle of wine before I could open the menu. "We're celebrating," she told the waiter, winking at me. Halfway through the appetizer, she leaned forward, eyes bright. "So, what would you do if I told you Ryan was joining us?" I took a slow sip of wine. "I'd say that's very thoughtful of you. Saves me the trouble of finding him later." Her smile faltered. "What does that mean?" Before I could answer, Ryan appeared, wearing a pressed shirt and that same grin he'd had in my living room. He pulled out the empty chair beside her and sat down like he owned it. "Hope I'm not intruding," he said. "Not at all," I replied, my voice even. "Actually, I think it's perfect." My wife looked between us, probably expecting some display of jealous outrage. Instead, I reached into my jacket and placed the thumb drive on the table. "What's that?" she asked. "Everything," I said. "Every text, every call, every time you two met up. Photos, receipts, even the little wine bar rendezvous yesterday. It's all here." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "Hey man," I cut him off. "You might want to listen closely, Ryan. Because the moment I walk out of here, this drive goes to 2 people, my lawyer and your girlfriend." His jaw tightened. My wife's color drained. "You wouldn't," she whispered. "Oh, I would," I said, leaning in. "You wanted to see my breaking point? This is it. And here's what happens next. You admit the truth, both of you, right here, right now. You don't lie, you don't spin. You put it on the table. Because if you don't," I tapped the thumb drive, "I burn everything you think you're protecting." Ryan's eyes darted to her. She was frozen, mouth slightly open. I could see the calculations in her head. The risk, the fallout, the way this little 7-day game had turned into a full-blown disaster. She swallowed hard. "Fine," she said quietly. "Yes, I've been seeing him. For a while." I nodded slowly. "And the lingerie?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "For him." I looked at Ryan. "You planning to step up for that? Or just play house until it gets inconvenient?" He didn't answer. I leaned back in my chair. "Congratulations. Experiment over. Here's your result. You found my breaking point. And you don't get to recover from it." The table was silent except for the faint clink of cutlery from nearby diners. I stood, sliding the thumb drive back into my pocket. "Enjoy the rest of your evening," I said. "It's the last one you'll have without consequences." Then I walked out, leaving them both sitting in the wreckage of their little game. I didn't go home after I walked out of that restaurant. I wanted her to sit there, taste her wine, and feel the clock ticking. Instead, I drove across town to my buddy Mark's place. We've been friends since high school, and he's one of the few people I trust enough to tell the whole truth. When I laid out what had happened over the last week, the 7-day challenge, Ryan's visits, the boutique trip, the wine bar, he just stared at me for a moment. "She told you she was going to push you," he said finally, "and still thought she could hide this?" "Pride," I said. "She wanted to see if I'd break. She didn't think I'd push back harder." Mark nodded toward my pocket. "That the drive?" I handed it to him. "Copy everything. Keep it safe." By the time I got home that night, the house was dark. She wasn't there. Good. I slept in the guest room, phone on silent. The next morning, day 8, if you counted beyond her game, I woke up to a string of messages from her. We need to talk. I went too far. Please, let's work this out. I ignored them. Instead, I called my lawyer, Diane. She's handled a few business disputes for me, the kind of attorney who doesn't waste words. You have proof? She asked. More than enough. Good. We'll start the separation paperwork today. I'll also draft a letter for him. A formal notice that any further contact will be considered harassment. That tends to cool people off fast. By mid-morning, I was sitting in her office signing documents. She laid out the timeline, the financials, the property division. 22 years together meant there was a lot to sort through, but our house, my retirement accounts, and most of the assets were in my name. She'd walk away with a fair share, but nothing she could use to keep playing games. As we wrapped up, Diane slid a sheet of paper across the desk. This is a disclosure statement. It lists all the evidence you're providing. Once it's filed, she can't claim ignorance. It's public record. I signed it without hesitation. By the time I left her office, my phone was buzzing again. This time, it was Ryan. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. We need to talk. Man to man. I almost laughed. Instead, I sent a text. Don't contact me again. Next call goes to your employer. That afternoon, I moved some funds into a separate account, changed the locks on the house, and set up a forwarding address for anything she might still get in the mail. She could pick up whatever was hers, under supervision, once Diane arranged it. At 6 p.m., she showed up at the door. I opened it just enough to block her from coming in. We can't end it like this, she said, eyes wide and desperate. I kept my voice calm. We ended at the moment you decided my marriage was a game. She stepped forward, lowering her voice. You won't send that drive to anyone, will you? We can work something out. I smiled without warmth. I already have. The papers are filed. The evidence is in my lawyer's hands. Whether Ryan's girlfriend gets a copy is up to you. Stay away from me, keep it clean, and maybe she doesn't see it. Her jaw tightened. You're really going to throw away 22 years? I looked her straight in the eye. You did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess. I closed the door and locked it, her muffled voice still calling my name through the wood. For the first time in a week, I felt the balance tip back in my favor. She'd set out to find my limit. Now she was about to learn what happens when you cross it. By Monday morning, I decided Ryan wasn't going to get the courtesy of a quiet exit. He'd been smug enough to sit in my living room, drink my bourbon, and smile at my wife like she was already his. Actions have consequences, and it was time he got his. I called a friend of mine, Steve, who works in corporate HR for a mid-sized financial firm. You still have contacts at Stratton and Pierce? I asked. Sure. Why? I've got a file you might want to pass along to their compliance department. One of their employees has been making some questionable choices. I emailed over a pared-down set of photos and text transcripts. Nothing salacious, just enough to show Ryan's extracurricular activities during business hours and his part in helping a married woman conceal an affair. Companies like Stratton and Pierce don't like reputational risks, especially when they involve potential conflicts of interest. 2 hours later, Steve called back. Let's just say you won't have to worry about him getting a promotion anytime soon. While Ryan's career prospects took a dive, my wife was apparently busy doing damage control of her own. Mutual friends started texting me variations of she says it's a misunderstanding and she claims you overreacted. I didn't bother defending myself. The truth was already working its way through the grapevine, and it didn't need my help. By midweek, Diane called with an update. She's hired an attorney. He's fishing for leverage, wants to avoid public embarrassment and settle quietly. Translation? I asked. She's worried about the evidence. Good, I said. Let her be. That evening, I sat on the porch with a beer, watching the sun sink behind the trees. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I checked it later, it was Ryan again. His tone had changed. Look, man, I don't know what she told you, but this is blowing up on me. My job's on the line, my girlfriend's furious. Just tell me what you want so this stops. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the voicemail to Diane with a note. Keep for records. 2 days later, I stopped by the house during her scheduled pickup window. She arrived with her sister, who glared at me like I'd personally ruined her Christmas. They loaded boxes of clothes and personal items into the trunk, careful to stay within the agreed list. As they finished, my wife turned to me. You really think you're going to come out of this looking good? I leaned against the doorframe. I don't have to look good. I just have to look honest. And compared to you, that's easy. Her sister muttered something under her breath as they drove off. Later that night, Mark called. Saw Ryan's girlfriend at the grocery store. Let's just say she knows everything. Word is, she tossed his stuff out on the lawn. I took a slow sip of my beer. That's a shame. The funny thing about betrayal is that once you drag it into the light, it has a way of burning everyone it touches. She'd wanted to test my tolerance. Now she was watching the fire she lit consume her and her accomplice. And I wasn't done. I had one last move to make. Something she'd never see coming. By the time Friday rolled around, she probably thought the worst had passed. The calls from Ryan had stopped. The gossip chain had gone quiet, and I hadn't sent her any new ultimatums. That's exactly how I wanted it. She didn't know I'd been spending the week setting up something permanent, something she couldn't talk her way out of or undo with a tearful apology. It started with a meeting at the bank. I moved the last of our joint savings into a trust solely in my name, closed the joint account, and had the statements mailed directly to Diane's office. Every automatic payment with her name attached was cut off. She could keep her credit card, but it was her problem now. Next was the will. I hadn't touched it in years, but after this week, there wasn't a single reason for her name to remain anywhere in my estate planning. She was erased from the life she thought she could control. The final step took place in a quiet coffee shop downtown, where I met with a reporter from the local business journal. He'd reached out earlier in the week after hearing rumors about a messy separation involving me, Ryan, and my wife. Normally, I'd keep things private. This time, I decided a carefully curated version of the truth could work in my favor. I didn't give him everything, just enough to paint the picture. A 7-day marriage test gone wrong, the involvement of another man, the photographic proof. I didn't use names, but there was enough detail that anyone who knew us would connect the dots. He promised the piece would run Monday. On Saturday afternoon, I got a text from her. I think we should talk. In person. I replied, Monday noon. The Oakwood Cafe. When she arrived, she wore that same blue dress from day 7. As if rewinding to the night she thought she still had control might help her now. She sat down, clasped her hands, and tried for a soft smile. I've been thinking a lot, she said. About us. About how we got here. I know I pushed too far, and I'm sorry. I thought we'd gotten stagnant. I thought maybe a little pressure would bring back the spark. I let her talk until she ran out of steam. Then I leaned forward. You want to know what I've been thinking about? Consequences. The kind that don't fade in a week. Her smile slipped. What does that mean? It means you wanted to find my breaking point, and you did. But you didn't think about what comes after. Monday morning, a story runs in the business journal. It doesn't name you, but everyone who matters will know. You'll live with the look in their eyes every time you walk into a room. She stared at me, jaw tightening. You wouldn't dare. I smiled slightly. You keep using that word. And yet, here we are. She leaned back, crossing her arms. So this is about humiliating me? This is about truth, I said. The truth you try to hide under the label of a challenge. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she stood, grabbing her purse. You're going to regret this. I shook my head. No, I'm going to remember it as the week you found my limit and lost everything. She left without another word. I sat there for a few minutes, sipping my coffee, already picturing Monday morning when the story would land. The spark she'd been looking for? She'd get it, in the form of a wildfire she couldn't put out. Monday came with the quiet satisfaction of knowing I didn't have to lift a finger anymore. The work was already done. At 7:42 a.m., the business journal's headline hit my phone. Local couple's marriage experiment ends in public scandal. It was exactly as I'd intended. Names withheld, but the details unmistakable to anyone who knew us. The 7-day tolerance test, the mystery man's repeated visits, the wine bar sighting, the photographic proof. By 9 a.m., my phone was buzzing with messages from mutual acquaintances. Saw the article. Wow. Unbelievable. She really thought that was a game. At 9:15, Diane called. Her lawyer just rang me. She's furious and threatening to sue for defamation. She can try, I said. Truth isn't defamation. By noon, her name was circulating anyway. She'd posted a vague, be kind, you don't know the whole story message on social media, which only invited more speculation. Comments filled up with thinly veiled references to the experiment and people asking if Ryan was still part of the test. Meanwhile, Ryan had bigger problems. Steve texted me a screenshot of an internal memo from Stratton and Pierce. Ryan Delaney. Employment terminated, effective immediately. No explanation given, but everyone in his department would know soon enough. That evening, I sat on the porch with a cold beer and watched the sun drop below the treeline. My phone rang, unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. It was her, voice tight with anger and desperation. You think you've won, but you've destroyed everything. Are you happy now? I didn't respond. 2 days later, Diane sent me the finalized separation agreement. Clean split. Assets divided exactly as I wanted. No alimony. She'd keep her car and whatever personal property she'd managed to move out during her pickup days. That was it. The same day, a mutual friend sent me a photo from the boutique in the next town. She was in line at the register, returning the custom lingerie. By Friday, the calls stopped. The texts slowed to nothing. Whatever she'd been telling herself about winning this game had burned away in the reality of public humiliation, career damage for her co-conspirator, and the cold fact that I was walking away without a scratch that mattered. The truth was, I didn't feel like I'd won anything. I just finally had an answer to a question I never asked. How far could she go before I broke? The answer was simple: 1 week. 7 days. And when she crossed the line, she didn't just get her answer. She got the permanent consequences that came with it. Saturday morning, I loaded the last of her leftover items into a box and dropped it at her sister's house. No note, no message, just closure. Driving back, I rolled the window down, letting the cool air wash over me. For the first time in months, the road ahead felt clear. No games, no tests, no wondering when the next challenge would come. Her experiment was over, and I was finally free.